We are currently 100 yards away from the most prized deer in America.
How many deer you think you're gonna get tonight?
80 around there.
220,000 deer on 300,000 acres would literally be an ecological disaster. So what we're trying to do, our mission here at Maui Nui Venison, is to help balance access to populations to hopefully be good for community, food systems, and the environment.
That was wild.
Jake Muse, I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Maui Nui Venison.
Maui Nui Venison.
It is so delicious.
Maui Nui Venison.
In the late 60s, early 70s, over 2 introductions, there were 9 deer introduced to the island of Maui. Over the last 30 to 40 years, that population has gone from 90 to about 70,000. And that population is gonna continue to grow till about 210, 220,000 deer, unless we do something about that. 9 years, we've harvested about 40,000 deer from the island of Maui. When we look at the number of animals we've harvested and turned into food, and then the number of animals that prevented, that's in the realm of almost 100,000 deer. If we hadn't have started, and of course those are the other community members that harvest as well, these islands would look a lot different today.
Day 1, it is currently 4 p.m. Time to go to sleep. This here is our living quarters. All right, guys, no idea what to expect here. Time to try and get like 5 or 6 hours of sleep. We showed up to the island of Maui with 2 primary missions. The first, help the Maui Nui team manage the axis deer population through a series of nighttime harvests, while also feeding the local community which has been affected by the recent fires in Hawaii. The second was to learn about axis deer as a protein source and ultimately make a 5-star meal. We were immediately welcomed into a tightly knit community of legitimate badasses, and I had no idea the ways in which this experience would push me both mentally and physically. Fairly tight quarters, but incredibly comfortable.
This space was designed with safety in mind. The amount of sleep and the quality of sleep you get is super, super important. And that's one of the #1 things we can do to defer risk at night. Quality calories is probably this next best thing we can do for safety. What the boys see here is an awesome place for them to hang out, and eat, and have fun. And what I see here is safety, yeah.
It was finally time for the action, and the night started at 10 p.m. I found myself in an outfitted shipping container surrounded by high-tech equipment. It felt like I was transported into a high-level sharpshooting special teams organization as Jake began running checklists to prepare. He has a great ability to hold his team accountable, and I think a big part of that has to do with how he communicates.
Gratitude is one of those things that if you can start in that place every day with, I am thankful for whatever is in front of me, even if sometimes it doesn't seem like enough, that's a very, very powerful thing. It's something that I've learned over the years is really powerful, and it's something that Junior does on a regular basis, and I really, really appreciate it. 15,550.
Yeah, all of it. And coffee. On that, I do know.
Let's do it. The first step was to locate the axis deer. While some guys were sighting in the guns, others sent out drones with thermal vision. The goal was to locate pockets of deer and give direction to the harvest teams. Then, just like that, I found myself on an ATV speeding into the chilly night. I couldn't see anything, and it was an eerie feeling knowing that there were wild animals literally all around us. The ATV ahead of me had 2 guys with flashlights, and every so often they would cast light into the abyss. What they were looking for were sets of 2 glimmering reflections. We were in position, ATVs shut off, and everyone went quiet. I wasn't even the one holding the rifle, but still, the only thing I could hear was my heartbeat as adrenaline was coursing through my body. Then, out of nowhere, the crack of the bullet leaving the gun echoed off the mountain, briefly interrupting the quiet landscape, but a second later, peace returned. We continued up the mountain, and I noticed on the front of the ATV there was a thermal screen, and a spotter stood above with a special set of night vision binoculars. Everything he could see was being transmitted to the screen in front of me, and looking at it, detail emerged from the darkness. In hushed voices, the spotter communicated to the shooter as shots rang out systematically. When silence finally returned, it was my turn to help out in the process. Green lasers pointed us in the right direction as we set off on foot to bring the deer back to the ATVs. This was my first time seeing an axis deer up close, and it is truly a beautiful creature. This was nothing like hunting. There was zero element of excitement over the death of that animal amongst the guys, rather a quiet respect for the value their life was providing and the job each of us were doing.
It's why we call it harvesting instead of hunting. We are more commercial fishing, like collecting an abundance of animals in a humane process. So there's no like individual relationship with them, even though we carry every single one on our back. And I think somehow that's easier for people to understand, that like it seems more like a food system than an individual like harvesting process.
The average person goes into a grocery store, just sees a cut of meat, assumes it's not even in their brain.
Yeah.
I don't want to say gruesome, but there's an element of, you see the death here,
yeah,
but it is truly the most humane way to do it.
You're taking the life of a wild animal. You know, what we do is very unique. There's not a lot of places that do this, you know. So when I think about it, like the moment that the bullet leaves the gun, you know, that animal changes from this really amazing animal that's out on the landscape immediately to an amazing food source. It changes immediately to the number of meals. When you have a deer on your back, like what I like to think about when I'm carrying a deer on my back is like, how many meals is this? You know, if you look at that as 1/3 of a pound of ground is one meal for one person, that's 120 meals that you're carrying with each deer. It's a big deal.
This was a special night where every single deer we harvested was donated, called the Holowai program.
You know, any community member that lives here on Maui shows their ID at a bunch of different locations, and you can get 2 pounds of axis deer, ground axis deer, per day for free. So that's what the Holowai program, you know, is for. Holowai is a term that's meant, like, basically translates to English as to get food where it's needed quickly.
That was wild. With all the deer loaded up on the ATVs, it was time to begin the process of converting the deer into a food source. We made it back to base and started hoisting each deer onto the 2 mobile processing units that are taken around the island wherever the harvest happens to be that night. They're these high-tech, temperature-controlled enclosures in which the guys quickly break down each animal.
From the minute harvested, it's supposed to be completed the slaughter process, i.e. the skin is off and there's no hair on it, in less than an hour. Being mobile, allowing us to go from place to place, is critical to our success for sure.
I learned that despite being a serious invasive species, the climate and truly wild nature of how axis deer live offer a unique nutritional profile.
Anytime you're going to go with something that is wild, you have an advantage over things that are typically farm raised. And why that matters, 2 big components is what I'd break it down to. One would be the leanness of it. So your ability to get a tremendous amount of protein with very little fat. And that's not that fat is bad. The amino acid profile, particularly in these wild axis deer, is unlike anything I've ever seen. Amino acids are critically important, and this one is loaded full of them, and the data are actually incredibly impressive of how packed they are with these critical amino acids.
I had the opportunity to work with the butcher team to break down the exact same deer we harvested, and I quickly learned it's a skill set that requires years of experience to master. Now, this butcher shop was an unassuming shipping container, but was filled with high-tech equipment, allowing us to grind and package thousands of pounds of venison. And in a full circle moment, we had the opportunity to be involved in the donation. Hand carrying the amazing food source we harvested and placing it in a meat freezer for community members, many of whom were displaced by the recent fires in Hawaii. 20 hours of work, 115 deer harvested, 3,312 total pounds of meat, 9,936 meals for the community. I made it back home and finally had the opportunity to cook the venison we harvested that night. This experience, no question, changed my life. I'm gonna be honest, I initially did this because I thought it'd be a cool video idea, and who wouldn't want to spend time in Hawaii? I somewhat envisioned a glamorous tropical hunting trip, but the reality was far more meaningful. The actual harvesting of the deer had less of an impact on me than the feeling of community I experienced. It helped me realize how difficult it can be to fully understand the hardships of others when our own personal community isn't involved. And I'm left feeling inspired to learn more about such amazing stories and share these experiences with you. That is unreal. Really hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.